What it do, y'all, and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm here to bring you a palette ranking of all of the eyeshadow palettes that I ranked and tried in the year 2023. Now this is a very popular series for me, and I think I'm going to do it a little bit more fast-paced this year, where I'm gonna already have all of the palettes ranked and put into their positions. I'm gonna tell you why they're in their positions, and of course on the screen I will have the ranking. I'm not gonna even bother keeping up with it because I'm never good at it, but there are 24 palettes in this year's ranking, and I feel like for me that's not too bad. I definitely want to decrease that to like half next year, but still, we're doing better, and that's all you can ask for. So let's go ahead and get into the ranking. All right, so like I said, I am doing a ranking. I already have it in order, so let's just dive on in. First things first, coming in at the very lowest spot for me personally is the Unearthly Cosmetics The Weirdos palette. And this was a palette that I got 2022 Halloween. I purchased it, but it did not come to me until very late in 2022, so I didn't actually get to try it out until 2023 this year, of course. And my biggest issue with this particular palette is the fact that this glamour shadow is too hardly pressed. I can't get any pigment from it. I know quite a few of you guys said that I could contact the owner, but to me, I didn't want to do that if I didn't find myself reaching for this palette overall. And overall, I didn't find myself reaching for this palette at all or thinking about this palette at all the rest of this year. I do like the color scheme and the combination of green, red, pink, and purple. But to me, I have this in other palettes, so yeah. That's coming in at 24. And I didn't say before, I have not done my palette declutter at the point of me filming this video. So this will definitely be more informative for me going into that declutter video because, you know, certain things I need to keep, certain things I just do not. Next, coming in, this was actually gifted to me by the brand M2U NYC. I featured this in a video for Asian Pacific Islander Month because the owner and founder is of Asian American descent, and this is in the shade I don't remember what color this trio or this six pan is, but I had to rank this so low mainly because of the variety and textures. It's just really not there. I do like the quality. The quality is fantastic in this palette, but it very much is a satin-like shimmer. So if I'm looking at all of these other palettes that I have in my collection, it's really not doing anything compared to the other palettes here on my desk. And on top of that, it's such a tight curated collection that some of the other ones where I could maybe reach into the palette for a variety of different colors, it didn't wow me. It didn't wow me compared to all of these other palettes this year. Next is the Nomad Cosmetics Haunted Europe palette. This is another one that I picked up late in the Halloween or holiday season of 2022, and I didn't get to actually testing it out and of course reviewing it for you guys until 2023. I think the quality of this palette is actually really good. This is what I would consider the best quality from the brand that I have personally tried, but once again, the variety and textures really is not there when I'm comparing it to these other palettes. And when I open up this palette, yeah, there are certain colors everywhere that I do like, but as a palette as a whole, I'm not as attracted to this palette. And I'm kind of trying to think back if I ever really was attracted to the palette or if I just picked up the palette because people said it was one of their best. And I feel like it definitely was that. So yeah, not a palette that I feel like is grand, but really solid quality. If you are interested, I definitely would highly recommend that one. Another one that I knew I wasn't going to think this was the best thing since sliced bread, but I wanted to try the brand. So this was one of the two that I knew I would get good use out of. And this is from Game Beauty. This is the Geo palette. It's a really beautiful color scheme. It is neutrals, which you guys know I've really been into neutrals. They're a little bit more on the yellow undertone spectrum, if you will. So once again, I really enjoy them. I kind of don't like this shade. This shade is so, I wouldn't even say cool tone, but it is, because it's not a rich black, it's more of like a charcoal, so it kind of clashes in my head with the rest of this palette. But overall, the palette's fantastic. This shade right here, Magna, is a beautiful foiled metallic, but if I'm looking at all of the other palettes, this, you know, it's not so exciting. It's not fetch, and I knew that going in, so I'm not really bent out of shape about it. But if I have to rank it and kind of truly compare it to all of these other palettes, it's not getting up there as far as I would love, but I definitely think I'm going to get so much use out of that particular palette. This is a collaboration palette with Odin's Eye and Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun, and I think this palette is beautiful. I really, really like it. It's those muted, colorful tones. You really stick with the green and purple color scheme. But this isn't my color scheme, if that makes sense, and completely understandable. I'm not Makeup Just for Fun, so of course my color scheme isn't truly going to be this. I am so happy I picked this up. Great quality, great formula, all of that jazz, but it's just not the one that I find that I think I'm going to be constantly reaching for at the end of the day. But I do genuinely enjoy this palette, and I'm really happy I picked it up. Another Odin's Eye palette coming right in, there's actually a cluster of them, I didn't actually realize, is the Jewels and Gems palette. This is purely color scheme once again. This cooler color scheme, it's just not for me. I don't find myself really reaching for cooler tones at all, pretty much since the very beginning of my makeup journey. I do tend to pick up quite a bit of the Odin's Eye products because I just genuinely like to review them, and the quality is always fantastic, and you never know, I may get more into cool tones later on, and their palettes really survive and last a very long time. So either way, happy to have this in my collection. It's just not perfect for me, but I love the variety and texture. I love the color variety and light to dark, all of that jazz. So yeah, it's a good palette. It just couldn't go any higher in my opinion. One that I liked it a little bit more on the color scheme, we're getting more up my alley, is the collaboration between Odin's Eye and Betty Jean. This is very bright, very colorful, which makes perfect sense for Betty Jean. And although I don't get a lot of use of color as I used to, I still very much love this color scheme because I can look at this palette and see so many different looks, and when I'm in the mood, I can go for it. The pigmentation, opacity, variety is great. I do kind of wish that there was a little bit more depth in this palette. It's pretty much mid-tone all throughout, but overall I really do like this palette, and once again would definitely recommend it. I don't know if any of these products are still available. If they are, I will do my absolute best to link and list them down below for you guys, just for easy access. Then I got an Adept Cosmetics palette. This is a palette I knew wasn't going to be, once again, the next thing since sliced bread, but I just wanted to add it to my collection. This is their Ninhydrin palette. I believe when I picked this up, they had a light and dark variety, and I believe this is the dark variety. Once again, great quality. I do, as always, wish that they had a couple more mattes, particularly in this palette, but they don't. They only have two, which is fine. The two mattes are great, and I like the variety that I can use with the mattes. I can use them both and build on each other, or I can use them as like standalone mattes in my crease and just pop a shade on. I really like this palette, I do, but once again, it was one of those palettes I knew wasn't going to be my next favorite. It was just one of those things I just wanted to add to my personal collection. Another one right up that same alley is from Glaminatrix Cosmetics. They found a couple extra palettes from the U Beauty palette, of course, and I thought that this palette was cute. I never really gravitated towards picking it up myself, and I think at the time when this originally launched, I was super into color, and this was just not colorful enough for me. Now I am more into neutrals, and I do enjoy it, but there's still just something about it that doesn't make it a favorite color scheme from the brand. That said, I really, really love this color scheme. I really love this palette. The texture and the variety is great. You have some multi-chromes, you have some shimmers, you have some metallics, you have some fantastic mattes. I love this palette. I love the variety. I genuinely do. It's just one of those palettes, once again, that I just added to my collection. I wasn't necessarily picking up because I knew it was going to be a great palette at the end of all great palettes. Next is the second palette that I picked up from Game Beauty, and this was the one that I felt like when I wanted color, it was really going to be it for me. And this is the Dead Dro palette, or 04. The other one was 03, in case you were interested. But this one just adds a little bit of something extra. I like this color because it's like, once again, yellow based color, right? I feel like these all pretty much have like a warmer undertone, except for this one, which is kind of leaning on the more neutral to cool. Either way though, I love this palette. I love the variety that I can do. I do really, really wish that this shade was significantly darker. For my skin tone, the depth is just not truly there. I love this like tealy shade too. It really adds something unique to the palette. But once again, the texture variety is just not fully there, especially because this luminous shade is more of a duochrome inner corner and not like a multi-chrome liquid foil that's going to go on your eye. The last of the trio from Odin's Eye collaborations for this year is the Lauren May Beauty collaboration. And this one, I feel like we're kind of right now in very similar spaces when it comes to color and neutrals. We both like neutrals, we both like color, and we like a splash of color. As you can see, I kind of did a splash of some color in my inner crease, and that's just how I've been if I'm going to put color on my eyes, unless I'm going full on colorful, which doesn't happen all that often right now. So this palette just speaks more to me, and I like that a majority of these colors are more warm toned, and that's just something that I reach for and gravitate towards more often. Once again, great quality, great opacity, great texture variety, all of that. I like the depth and variety. I will say this shade, do not let it play you. It is more of a satin, but yeah, I really like it. Highly recommend. I recommend pretty much all of these palettes, really. And then the last palette on this like bottom half, the way that I kind of divided it, is the Odin's Eye Stone and Rock palette. And this one I actually really, really like. I like the color scheme, I like the texture, I like the variety in like light to dark. I like pretty much everything about this palette, but to me this is like an elevated neutral palette. It's not like everything, you know what I mean? It's a great palette, do not get me wrong, but there's just something about it that didn't get it into kind of the other half of the collection that I've done. I have absolutely no idea if I actually split this 12 and 12, but for me this was just kind of the bottom half, not because these palettes are bad, they didn't have something, and this palette was just missing something. To be quite honest, I couldn't tell you what it is. It might genuinely be the fact that this isn't my favorite matte formula from the brand. I do have a favorite matte formula. I'm sure I'm the only one because I always blab about it, but yeah. That's the bottom half for me. Like I said, I don't know if that was 12. It would be nice if it was, but I didn't take the time to count. So let's go to the top half. And starting off on that, we're gonna go to the Blend Bunny Surge palette. Now, I really like this palette. I love how this is set up where you kind of have a gradient situation, but you still stick with color families. I really, really like that. My issue with this palette is kind of twofold. One, I don't like the shimmer formula. The shimmer formula for me is just not it. It's not a personal preference at all. I like something that's a little bit thicker. This is a little bit thinner, and it doesn't have like enough like silicone in there for me to, so it really like foils over the eye. It's a little bit drier, and it's not dimensional. You're not seeing any multi-chromes here. You're not seeing any duochromes here. You're just seeing straight up shimmers. So for me, it's not my favorite formula. And then these neons, I just really don't like this neon formula. That might be just the concept of neons in general. I do believe this is the first time that I've tried a neon formulation, but just not a favorite. So for me, I'm really reaching for this palette for these top 3 rows. Not an issue at all, but that really tells you how much I like the brand's formula when the top 3 rows of these beat pretty much all of those other palettes. That's how much I really like that formula personally, but that's very, very, objective. Next is another Odin's Eye palette, and this is their collaboration with Angelica Nyquist for Halloween. This is the Trick or Treat palette. This is her more neutral kind of take on neutrals and I like it. I like certain parts of it, but overall I must say, this palette's okay, and I really just picked it up because it was in a duo and I wanted to showcase both of them, and I knew that going in, so I'm not bent out of shape about it. For me, it's just not my perfect kind of neutral Halloween themed palette, but it's beautiful, and I love these burgundies. I love the neutrals, but there's just bits and bobs that I like. I don't like the full color scheme as a whole. Personal preference though, personal preference. Next, we have something that I don't think anybody would have thought would be so high up, but for some reason I really, really like it. This is the Tom Ford quad. This is the Forbidden Pink quad that I picked up at a CCO. I really like this quad. I really, really do. The matte formula is great. You do have that more cream to powder matte, which I love that type of formula. And then you have more satin shimmers. But there's just something about this quad, the ease of it, the variety and looks that I can personally create. I just really like this quad. Is this a quad that I think you should go out and run to pick up? Absolutely not. Do not do it to yourself. I was able to get this for half off and then some, so I picked it up in addition to a perfume, which was the reason I went to the CCO. But otherwise, they're not, I wouldn't necessarily say they're worth it, especially not full price, but since I have it and I really do enjoy it and actively am reaching for it more and thinking about it more than the other palettes, that's how it got so high in the ranking. Next is actually my inspired palette from Adept Cosmetics. Absolutely nothing wrong with the formula. I love the formula, the textures of the shimmers, the mattes, all of it. The thing about this palette is I feel like this palette overall leans a little bit more cooler, in my opinion. I'm just not reaching for cooler tones like that anymore. And so that's kind of why this fell down, especially when I'm really comparing it to the other palettes that are higher up on this ranking. It just, great quality, all of that jazz. It just missed the mark very, very slightly. Something that once again you guys probably wouldn't have expected to get so high is actually the Huda Beauty 9 pan. This is the more warm tone. It's literally called Warm Matte Obsessions. I just really like this palette. I honestly, there's no true justification. I love the combination of the creams and the mattes. I know some people felt like the creams did crease on them. On my eyes, they did not crease. Whether I set them with these mattes or other mattes, I just really like this palette. I love that I can do a very quick go-to look seamlessly, especially like when I'm traveling. I don't really wear a lot of makeup when I'm traveling, and if I am, it's going to be very, very neutral, very, very like in the corner, like in my kind of small wheelhouse for travel. Very, very minimal makeup, and this is something that I like to use. I've gotten a lot of use out of it, especially if I need like a cream base or even to prep my lid for another shade, anything like that. It's been really, really nice. So very, very happy with that product. Something that I honestly, when I picked it up, I was very, very cynical. I did not expect to enjoy this nearly as much as I did. This is the Glamlite Scooby-Doo palette. This is a huge palette, and that's why it's lower on the list than it could have been. For me, it's just a tinge bit too big for my personal preference, but I love the quality in here. The mattes are great, the shimmers are great, and for me, that was a huge surprise because I had not previously had a really good experience with Glamlite shadows. So really, really happy with this. I will say, in the grand scheme of things, some of these lighter tones in this column don't work great on my skin tone. They just look very ashy and they're powdery and they just kind of fly away. But the really nice deep tones do really work. I will say some of these are more mid-tone, but overall I just really like this palette, and I think this palette is just a really good reminder that sometimes certain products from a brand don't work for you, but don't necessarily write the whole brand off. And I'm so happy that I picked that up. There are quite a few products in that particular collection that I love. The blush duo and the lip duo, great. Keeping it going, we have the Little Ghost palette, which is the collaboration between Odin's Eye and Angelica Nyquist. And this one could have been higher, but for me, the thing that I gravitate to, I look at this palette and this is what I want to do. These two right here. This is my bread and butter. I will come to this palette specifically for that duo. Is that rational? No. No, it's not. But that's what I do when it comes to this palette. To be quite honest, I really don't care about the rest of the shadows. I think that this could make a really good eye look, and I'm sure that's what I did in the video. I'm sure I also did a blue look as well. This is a very, very unique denim kind of blue, which I think is really great. But for me, when I think about this palette, this is the duo that I think of. And because of that, because that's where my head completely lies, I couldn't allow this palette to get higher, but the quality of all of the shadows is really, really good. I just look at this palette and that's the color combination, that's the eye look that I automatically want to do. Next is something, once again, I didn't think it was going to be this high, but I've gotten so much more use out of it after reviewing it, and I'm enjoying it more, which... shocker. And this is the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. I really think that this is one of those palettes that is very deceptive. You try it out and you're like, oh, well, that's not anything really great or anything to write home about. But then you just keep using it because of the ease of the palette. This shade is one of those shades that for my skin tone pretty much blends in. There's a very, very slight difference between that and like my foundation set and all of that jazz. So I really like this to start any look. And then this shade right here is dark enough that it will show some depth. I do kind of wish that there was a replacement of one of these three shades. I feel like they're all kind of in the same realm and they really don't do a huge difference. That way I could have one more matte crease shade, but this has really kind of become my go-to lid shade with one of these other kind of more toppery shades in the inner corner and the beginning of my lid. So this has really been a palette that has really climbed up the ladder lately. I wore it for my graduation. Or did I use the Natasha Denona Trio? I think I used that palette. But either way, it's more or less the same difference. Great quality. I really do like it. And I'm very happy that I kind of didn't write it off and that I continue to get more use out of it. Okay, we have 4 palettes left. Whew, okay, we're almost there. So next we have the Cosmic Brushes Delicious Delights palette. Now this palette, once again, really great quality. I love the mattes. I love the shimmers. There is one multi-chrome here, and that's the Sprinkle shade. I really do like it. The one reason, as I said in the roundup video originally, is that this palette only has one deep darkener shade. I like to have a variety of options. As you have a variety of different options for lighter tones to kind of blend out your look or to do an inner corner, you have quite the variety of mid-tones. This blue just does not appear on my skin tone as deep as this purple does. And even then, I wish that the purple was just a tinge bit more deeper. So that's why this palette had to come in at number 4. Otherwise, fantastic, and I would highly recommend. It is now pretty much my favorite pastel palette that I have in my collection. Although there are some really close runner-ups, that's still a fantastic pastel palette. Okay, top 3 palettes. As I typically do in these videos, I will go ahead and tease you guys just for a tinge, and I will also give you guys the 3 palettes that are left so that if you would like to guess down below in the comments, feel free. So we have the Cosmic Brushes Muse palette, we have the Natasha Denona Yucca palette, and then we have the Sumerian palette from Adept Cosmetics. So I will take just a bit of time and give you guys, how long has that been there? Great. Now you guys have had some time to pause this video if you wanted to go ahead and comment. Let's just dive on in. So coming in at number 3 is, I'm kind of second guessing this now, Either way, coming in at number 3 is the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. By far, this is one of my favorite Natasha Denona palettes. I absolutely love this palette. This is the yellow-based undertone neutral palette of my dreams, at least for right now. I absolutely love it. I will say there are a couple of shades that I just don't particularly like though. Camo it's just a bit too ashy, a bit too white based. It's good, but it's just a bit off for me personally. It does work though. And then this Fushi shade, I don't really like that shade. I there's just something about it. It's not a particular love, but I love as always her cream to powder shades. Really, really good. And I do like that the flax shade is one of the darker shades, and that is a more traditional matte as well. So if you're not a fan of her more cream to powder, you at least get one traditional matte that's dark, as well as a more cream to powder matte that's dark. I really like this shade palette. I will say these are some of, I feel, her best shimmers that she has presented. They're a lot more sparkly. They're not just like straight like twofold. There's some dimension there, which I genuinely enjoy. Coming in at number 2, you see how I can count from 3 to 1, is the Cosmic Brushes Muse palette. Are you surprised? I am too. This palette is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I love the earth tones here. I think this is great for like that fall, winter time period. And I was really getting so much use out of it, loving it to reach for particular colors. And then of course, creating looks with this particular palette. But there's just not a va-va-voom shadow in here, right? So at least in their Delicious Delights, there was one multi-chrome, right? Otherwise, you get kind of more one-dimensional shadows in the shimmers, which isn't a bad thing. I do enjoy their shimmer formula, but once again, it's just one-dimensional. And to me, the palette that comes in number 1, which of course you guys already know now, has something more. It just has a little bit more. This is a duochrome, but to be quite honest, those lighter kind of white to colored shades, I don't really consider anything to be dimensional because those have been coming out for eons. And so, you know, it's just my brain kind of associates that with like a basic Betty shimmer. I hope that makes sense. So of course, last and certainly not least, coming in at the number 1 spot is the Sumerian Sunset palette from Adept Cosmetics. I love this palette. It's such a beautiful palette and it's just really, really fun. Do I wish that there were darker shades in the matte formulation? Yes. Yes, I do. But I think from what I have, I can make a variety of different looks, and every last shimmer is just great. I will say some of these shimmers do lean a little bit cooler, even though the shimmer may be warmer. So to me, my brain doesn't like that, and my brain would honestly love to depot those and put those in the other palette, the inspired one, and take some of the warmer tone shimmers from the inspired and put it here. But for right now, I'm gonna let them stay where they were created. Overall, I think this palette just brings me so much. You get so much variety in texture, color scheme. You get quite a bit of multi-chromes. You get some dual chromes with some shimmer in there, and then you get a great matte formula. So I mean, honestly, I think that one is just the one for me this year that just topped the rest of them. I would love to hear down below what palettes you picked up this year, if you did pick up any palettes, and then of course what your top couple of palettes are. Definitely go ahead and type them up for me. Is there a palette that I did not talk about here that you picked up this year, that launched this year, and you would love to recommend it to me? Definitely comment it down below in the description box. I am hoping to do better purchasing wise in 2024. But that said, I mean, I am a makeup lover, so I definitely can see me picking up a palette or two next year. So definitely go ahead and comment them down. Maybe I'll pick up your favorite next year, and maybe it will be my favorite for next year. So that's all I got for you guys today. I hope this wasn't too long, but who knows? And I will see you guys in my next one. Bye, guys.